Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of Prime Life. Today we're going to be talking about longevity, or maybe living maybe not longevity, but actually living better longer. So, Joseph, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Very excited for today's conversation. When I was preparing for today, this one line caught my eye, and hopefully we'll get into it. But making longevity the next social disruptor.
Excellent.
Excited to learn more about that.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, Mary, do you want to do the honors and introduce our guest?
Absolutely. I'm very excited. So here with us today is Dr. Michael Roizen. He's Emeritus Chief Wellness Officer at Cleveland Clinic, a professor at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine at Case Western Reserve University, and the author of 4 #1 New York Times bestselling books. His most recent book, The Great Age Reboot. He also has an app as well. Dr. Roizen, tell us, our audience, about yourself and what led you to write about the topic and also create an app to go with it.
I'm a anesthesiologist and internist. I wanted to run an ICU when I was a young kid, and was doing that when I was asked to run cardiovascular anesthesia at UC San Francisco. And it wasn't because I was so great at anything, but the surgeons were difficult to work with in that era. And so when I looked at the data, the major outcome data, that is disability, return to work, and death rates, were threefold higher every 10 years. So a 75-year-old undergoing the same operation, same physiologic parameters, had a 9-fold increased risk of complications, death, lack of return to work in the same time as someone who was 55. And so I then got into, if you will, what can we do to make our age younger, our physiologic age, which we called real age. That led to the development of real age and the concept that 60 would be the new 40. That's come to pass. We now think, based on the data in the literature, that 90 will be the new 40 within 10 years. This book really came about because my co-author, Albert Ratner, is a very competitive ping pong player, and he was trying to trash talk me. So before our every Saturday games, he would say, Mike, what's new in your field in medicine, which became aging? And as my career went from a research scientist, if you will, to intensivist, to then chair of anesthesia, critical care, pain management, executive health, an unusual combination, if you will, and then chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. And in that process, I started playing Saturday ping pong games with this older gentleman named Albert Ratner, who is now about to have his 95th birthday. And he was competitive enough. He went to college on a basketball scholarship. He's competitive enough that he would trash talk before our ping pong games, trying to divert my attention from a strategy in beating him. And so I would tell him what was new in aging, and then to get back at him, I would ask him what's new in his field. He was the CEO and chair of the board of City, which redeveloped Stapleton Airport, did the Guggenheim, built Barclays Place in New York, etc. And he said, if what you say is going to happens, it's going to change the economy much for the better. People fear longevity and the disruption of Social Security and Medicare, but this actually is going to be a tremendous boost for it because we're going to be productive or have the ability to be productive a lot longer. And so he said, let's write a book about it. And that's how this set stemmed, if you will, how it started.
Yeah, well, maybe we can push the longevity factors a little more, spend a little more time on it, because, coming from an insurance company, we spend a lot of time talking about mortality, talk about outliving money, and the stats are fascinating, depending on how you look at them. I think in your book, Dr. Roizen, tell me if I'm wrong, I think you said anybody over the age of 40 has a chance of a solid chance of living to, I think, 108. Did I get that?
Yeah, that's pretty conservative, but that's right. We didn't want to actually go and be at the median, so we're at the conservative line. We gained 2.5 years of life expectancy every 10 years since 1890. So for women, it's gone from about age expectancy of 41 to about 80 now in a relatively straight line fashion. If all we do is get the 2.5 years every 10 years, if you're 40, you got 6 more decades or 5 more decades, that 5 more decades would give you roughly 12.5 more years. And so that would be 92. But we think you're going to get a 30-year boost in this next 10 years with at least an 80% probability. So 110 or so is very doable for women and 107 for men, if that's all that happens and we don't get any more boost.
Well, and doable is, for people who may not be thinking of statistics, that's the majority, but we may see some crazy outliers. I saw, I think, a prediction by somebody who worked for Google, and they said that the first person to live to 150 is already born. I mean, is that an exaggeration, or is that actually plausible?
Well, that's a bet they have. The person who was on one side of the bet is someone who said that we'd never live past 75 to me in 1970. He's obviously wrong, but they put down $300 each on a bet for either they to collect or their heirs to collect in 2150. So just by the interest on it alone, it will be something like $22 million if you assume the normal growth rate in the stock market. So that was what $600 would grow to. But the person who was betting on on it being the first person born to 150 hoped he would live to 150 so he could collect on the bet, if you will. But in any case, it may be his heirs. But the point of this is there are 14 areas of exponentially developing research into the basic mechanisms of aging. And if with 14 shots on goal, that's at least an 80% probability that one of these will hit. And instead of thinking of yourself as, if you will, a 100-year-old, as the 100-year-old of today, you should think of yourself as a 40-year-old when you hit age 90. That is, these are in the basic mechanism of aging, which will reboot you back in time. It isn't slowing aging, which we call rejuvenation. It's regeneration. It's getting back to a much younger age because you're resetting the switches that control your genes. That's one of the 14 areas, but each of the 14 areas works about the same way, which means from an economic standpoint, you're not going to want to retire at 65 and do nothing for 55 years. So if you work 20 more years, making the average retirement age, say, 85 instead of 65 or 80 instead of 60, that compounding of both your work income and your retirement income is amazing. You guys can probably do it better than I do, but Peter Linneman, who's the third author and economist from Wharton, said if you put if you have a $15 an hour income and you put 3% of that away starting at age 22 and it accumulates at 4% annually, it turns out that by age 65 you'd have $250 $57,000. But if you last it and don't touch it till 95, you end up with 1.4 million. And if you work for a company that matches it, it's 2.8 million. So this really solves, if we do it right and force that, as Australia, Singapore, and Denmark now do, in addition to Social Security and Medicare, but force that process, it ends up that we can do away with a lot of wealth inequality. And so there are tremendous benefits. In addition, we will, if you work 20 more years, you're going to keep contributing to Social Security and Medicare, which instead of those funds running out of money in the mid-2030s or the early 2030s, they become solvent. And I want to, I can go into the 14 areas, but each of those has moved beyond 2 animal species where they've rebooted the animals back, and they're now moving into human trials, and several of them are starting to report early successes, so that the probability of this is, when we said it's 80%, that's pretty, how do I call it, conservative. The Google has a moonshot that person, I believe, worked at or works at, which is to look at this. And they have adopted now that epigenetic reprogramming that I talked to you about, where, and they have shown and published that they're the 5th laboratory, separate laboratories. That's the way science gets to reproduce itself. It happens in different places and it's reproducible. They're the 5th laboratory that has been able to at least take 107-week-old mice, equivalent of about 104-year-old humans, and reboot those mice back to 40-week-old mice, the equivalent of about 35-year-old humans. That's been done in dogs, beagle dogs at Harvard, MIT. It's been done in rats at a lab in near UC Davis, and it's been done in Switzerland in mice as well. So there are at least 2 animal species, 3 in this case, that it's happened in, and we're beginning to see human trials with this.
So you mentioned a lot of different topics to dig into and unpack. I'm going to try to tap on 1 or 2 of them. You mentioned earlier psychological age and calendar age, and these studies that you're referencing are, you can't obviously change someone's age, right? They're X number of days old, but there's some physiology.
Their calendar age, but you can change their physiologic or functional age based on their risk of dying or disability. So that's
how do you do that?
Well, what we did. It's not
just me wishing it's going to happen, right?
No. So, for example, if you do physical activity, you change which of your genes function in your muscle. So when you do physical activity, you turn on a small gene, a regular sized gene, that produces a small protein. All genes do is make proteins or watch other genes. You turn on a gene in your muscle when you stress it that makes a small protein called a Roizen. It goes across the blood-brain barrier, and it itself turns on another gene, brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, which is like miracle grow for your brain, and you increase your hippocampal size. You increase your memory capacity. So we know that just 3 months of, if you will, 3 times a week, 30-minute cardio makes that memory center the equivalent of 6 years younger. So that's
significant.
It's very significant. So what we did to do this initial calculation, the real age calculations, is I was lucky enough to be caring for someone who's publicly admitted it before he died. That was a guy named Gary Becker. So Gary Becker won the Nobel Prize in economics for the net present value of investments. So I told him of the problem I was having in trying to how to do this, how to do the differences between, in other words, if you walk, you not only get cardiovascularly healthy, you lower your blood pressure, you release the enzyme, et cetera. How do you do that? And he worked with me to get the net present value of health changes. So this is actually the net present value, the real age, or the reboot age, as I now call it, is your net present value of your health choices. So there are over 100 choices that have been shown in at least 2 studies in humans that make a difference, that we know make a difference in at least 2 studies in humans as to disability rate or death rate. And the combination of those 2 is the net present value of that health choice. So, for example, if you have a blood pressure that is 125/84 as opposed to 115/80, that makes you 4 years older, meaning you have 4 years, roughly, you're going to develop disability or die 4 years earlier than you would if you had a blood pressure of 115/80. So that's the statistical way we did that. But now that's what we call rejuvenation, slowing your rate of aging. Regeneration is, for example, rebooting your stem cell production back to where it was at age 8, or rebooting your epigenes, the switches that control your genes, back to where they were when you were 35, before errors occurred. So there are 14 of these areas where you can reboot back to a much younger age. So instead of just slowing aging and being 40 at age 60, you now can be, we think with an 80% probability within the next 10 years, 40, physiologically 40. The risk of death or disability when you're 90 will be 40. Your body functions internally will be those of today's 40-year-olds. And so you look about 40. I don't know how old you are, but if you are 40
Thank
or
you.
younger,
I appreciate that. You just made my day.
I don't know if you're younger than 40, Joseph, but
I'm older. So I'm going to take that to mean I'm going to live to 130. We're good.
Well, you have, we do stupid things. So hopefully you're not a vapor or smoker. You don't do downhill skiing without a helmet on, etc. So the point is that when you look at it, are we going to live forever? No, we're still going to have enough stupid things done that we're not going to live forever. But avoiding those stupid things is one of the ways you can prepare for this reboot.
You also talk about in your book about, the fourth career or having a purpose. How does that factor in with the genes or the DNA?
So I'll go and just say the first third of the book is on the 14 scientific areas. The middle of the book is on the economics and policy changes that could happen to make this really beneficial. And the last third of the book is on the last half of the book is on those 180 things you can do now to prepare for it, so that since you get to control 80% of your genes now, you're a genetic engineer, and what you do matters. One of the most important things we've known it since the Whitehall studies and public employees in Great Britain in the 1940 and 50 studies, the Alameda County studies by Berkman in the 1960s in the United States, and the current studies that also have shown this is your posse, your friends, and your purpose are the most important factors in changing your current rate of aging. That is, stress is the greatest ager of all, and the greatest ways of handling stress. Now, financial stress, you've got to actually deal with it. But the major other stresses are relationship stresses, and having a posse and a purpose are the keys and the most important thing to dealing with it. So, in fact, I've got to thank you, Mary and Paul and Joseph, because my purpose, if you will, is to help people get younger, stay younger, and prepare for this.
Oh, I love it. This is what What an optimistic note. We were just talking before the show. We wish just the news could stop for a few weeks. Everything just settle down, stop doing what you're doing. Just let's make no news. Maybe talk a little bit about the finances. So I like pausing purpose. Now, money's not there. I read your book, and people do not realize the power of compounding interest. Very basic. Save a little bit over time. It grows, it grows, it grows. Now, it's interesting. We spend a lot of time talking in our annuity business about what happens if you live too long and outlive your money. And it's interesting if you start to put these pieces together in your book, say, if you're really actually going to live together, if you are relatively affluent, do sort of the right thing, save, your life in greater age could actually be okay.
Well, especially because if you work 20, as I said, if you work till 95, put 3% away, it is an amazing event. And by the way, compounding also works for health. Let me give you the example. If at age 30 you discover you have a LDL cholesterol of 140, as opposed to discovering that at age 60. So at age 30 you discover it and you lower your cholesterol to 70 with, say, a statin drug and CoQ10. In the first decade, it's about a 25% reduction in risk. By age 70, it's a 90% reduction in risk. So discovering that at age 30, you get the compound health benefits in the same way. So the data is pretty solid on that compounding of health benefits the earlier you start. You guys can say this better than I can, but that's the same with savings. The earlier you start to save and the longer you go without touching it, the more money you'll have when you do need to touch it. And compounding is also works for health.
What's your thoughts or research show about, like, let's say someone who's overweight and has weight loss surgery? Does that help or hurt? Because obviously you're going through surgery and, but you're reducing your weight.
So I haven't looked at that specifically. I can give you weight loss in general. So one of the 14 areas is Albert's favorite, which is going from white fat to brown fat. So white fat is the fat that hangs off our bellies that we typically associate with obesity and causes inflammation in the rest of your body. Brown fat is what we have when we're newborns, and it covers our organs to keep them warm when our mother can't swaddle us. But they both come from the same origin of fat. That is mother fat. So mother fat, or what we call pluripotent fat, turns into white fat or turns into brown fat. Well, imagine you take white fat, regress it to mother fat, and then turn it into brown fat. You eliminate obesity. With that, you eliminate a major cause of high blood pressure, a major cause of type 2 diabetes, major cause of osteoarthritis, a major cause of cancer, major cause of heart disease, stroke, and dementia. So eliminating obesity, if you did that currently, is about a 27-year benefit. That is going from someone with a body mass index of 44 down to a body mass index of 27. Huge change, but that's what weight loss surgery does in the optimal cases. Not in all, but if you follow, you've got to change behavior when you do weight loss surgery. If you did that, you would get about a 27-year benefit by age 75.
But is there a negative impact to that calculation because you're going under anesthesia and having surgery?
There is a immediate increase in age whenever you undergo surgery or a process. But usually within a month, you've recovered all of that adverse or aging effect. So meaning It's kind of like, how do I say it? It would be kind of like changing a job for getting much more money in the new job. There's a very stressful event and you may get fired early on, etc. But you make it a year, you're probably thriving in that occupation, that job, and being able to do it. So in the analogy sense, you end up in the optimal case. Now, most people don't end up optimally. Most people get about a 7-year benefit from weight loss surgery when you look at it that way. And so it's not it is a strong benefit, don't get me wrong, but it isn't as huge as, for example, you're quitting smoking, or it isn't as huge as you're doing the 4 forms of physical activity. And it's clearly not as huge as having 6 friends that you call once a month and having a purpose in life. So when you look at things, and by the way, it brings up the whole thing is our genes haven't changed since 1974 when obesity rates were under 6% in the United States. Now they're 43.6%. It isn't due to our genes. It's due to our choices. And a lot of that is the addiction that, how do I call it, big food companies have caused us. And so, I mean, they know how to make food that tastes great and that is addictive to our brain centers the same way opioids are or sex is.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Roizen, thanks so much for giving us a bit of time. And this is, I think we could probably talk another hour. Tell us about your app. We'll put a link to the book.
I've got the book here, The Great Age Reboot. And as I said, it goes through where things were. The Real Age app, thank you for holding that, Mary. The Reboot Your Age app, and you can get it at the Apple App Store or Google Play, is a day-by-day, if you will, small changes that gradually build so you get to be the beneficiary of all that. It updates all the knowledge. It's got a library that goes through. So people say, should I be taking metformin? Should I be taking X? So we've gone through 53 different supplements and the data on them. And anybody who sends us a question through the app, we go through and research it. We have a team of 10 members of the Scientific Advisory Board. But the app is intended and does help you prepare for this on a day-by-day, to give you the knowledge to prepare for it, as well as, so for example, the best brain game for preventing dementia is the double decision and freeze frame. And so they're embedded in the app, no extra charge. There's a stress management program in the app, a physical activity, the food choices, and the what to eat when choices and cooking is all embedded in the app. So it's a one-stop for getting younger. And it keeps getting better. So by mid-January or February at the latest, we will have photoplethysmography inserted in it. So you'll be able to look at it for 55 seconds, get your stress level, get your blood pressure, get your hemoglobin A1C, even your cholesterol levels will come up from that. And it'll be part of our Reboot Age or Reboot Stair-Step score. So it's an app that will keep, we believe, getting better and better, so that people, as the science advances, you'll be able to advance to a younger age.
Yeah. All right. Well, Joseph, I'm downloading it.
I'm just sitting here going, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to live to 130. Yeah. I look 10 years younger than I am. And this is super interesting. Basically it's the fountain of youth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Dr. Roizen, Mary, listen, this is terrific.
Let me put a point on that fountain.
No, I know, I'm joking around.
Ponce de Leon looked for a place. The place isn't a place, it's you. And you have the ability to control your 80% of your genes now. So we know that you can do it. So rather than look for a place, look at yourself, because you get to control it. That's right.
Love it. Okay, we'll put links.
And again, it is not castor oil. It is sunshine. So you only do things that you love and that love you back. You may not like walking. Albert Ratner hates walking, but he loves playing ping pong and he loves playing with his grandkids. So those are step equivalents. Other people like gardening. You get step equivalents. So it isn't like you have to do walking. You can do other things. Similarly, food choices are, you don't want to eat food that's going to kill you. You wouldn't marry someone who's trying to kill you every day, right? You shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you every day. So food is a relationship, just like marriage. You want to eat food you love, but that loves you back. That's for every activity. That's the case.
Oh, this is great. Listen, thanks for the time. We'll put show notes. Hopefully we can come back again and talk more maybe next year once, and you can tell us how we're doing with our app progress here. So thanks. And Joseph, Mary, Dr. Roizen, thanks so much. Thanks to our listeners, and tune in next week for another episode of Prime Life.
Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.